name is Gary. I'm going to be going over JSON, which is one of the most important concepts that you will learn as a programmer or as a web developer. I'm going to be going over what JSON is and why you should know it, and all the syntax involved with JSON. And at the end of the video, I'm going to go through examples of JSON. JSON, also known as JavaScript Object Notation, is simply a data representation format very similar to XML. It's used widely across the internet for almost every single API that you will access, as well as for config files and things such as games, text editors like VC Code, and many other places throughout programming. It's used because it's extremely lightweight, send back and forth due to the small file size. It's easy to read compared to something like XML, since it's much cleaner and there's not as many opening and closing tags to worry about, and it also integrates very nicely with JavaScript, since JSON is just a superset of JavaScript, which means anything you write in JSON is valid JavaScript. So it integrates nicely with JavaScript, which is used all throughout the web for front end or back end of web applications. Also, almost every single major language has some form of library or built-in functionality to parse JSON strings into objects or classes in that language, which makes working with JSON data extremely easy inside of a programming language. Throughout your programming career, you're going to use JSON all the time, whether it's creating an API, consuming an API, or creating config files for you to use or for other people to use for your application. Now, we understand that JSON is what JSON is and why it's important. Let's dive into some of the syntax involved to JSON by starting by talking about the types JSON can represent. As we know, if JSON is the data representing format, so we need to be able to represent a certain data types within it, and JSON natively supports strings, numbers, and these numbers can be in any format, whether they're decimal numbers, whole numbers, negative numbers, even scientific notation numbers. It supports booleans, which can be either true or false. It supports null, which essentially stands for nothing, arrays, which can be a list of any of the types that we've talked about, plus the next type, which is the final type of object. An object is the most complex, but most used type within JSON. And it's also and it allows you to represent values that are key value pairs. So you give it a key and then a value, and that value can be anything of the other types that we've talked about. So string, number, boolean, array, null, any of those different types can be value for a key. So here we have XML. XML stands for Extensible Markup Language. So JSON uses arrays. It can store, like we said, strings, numbers, booleans, objects, or other arrays inside JSON array. Values must be separated by commas. Arrays in JSON are almost the same as arrays in JavaScript. In XML, it's set up more like a tree, whereas JSON is more like two-dimensional. We'll call it three-dimensional, not two-dimensional. But XML is set up like a tree, and it's got branches out with many different elements, many different children. Each child can have children. Those children can have attributes or a piece of content. So you got grandparents with parents and children, and each of those can have attributes, pieces of content. Each tree has an open tag and a closed tag. Each child is inside that particular node. So JSON and XML are similar because both are self-describing. Both are hierarchical. I can't say it, sorry. Both JSON and XML can be parsed and used by lots of programming languages. Both can be fetched with an Xml Http request, which I will show you a little bit later, but we're not going to get too much into because my video would be really long. Json is unlike XML because Json doesn't use end tags. Json is shorter. Json is quicker to read and write. Json can use arrays. Now, even though Json is shorter, there's a misconception because XML doesn't include the spaces and all the needless, senseless characters inside. So XML actually is smaller in size. It could be half the size of a JSON file. All right, so biggest differences, XML has to be parsed with an XML parser. JSON can be parsed by a standard JavaScript function. JSON is shorter to type, but, and as I just said, XML actually uses less space because it doesn't include the unnecessary characters like spaces. Why JSON is better than XML. Now, I really think this is a personal opinion. Some people still like using XML. I've talked to, where I work, I talked to some of the guys that work in our development, software development, and they actually, some of them like XML better. They scoff at JSON being so popular and it taking over XML. Anyways, XML is much more difficult to parse than JSON. That is a true statement. JSON is parsed into a ready-to-use JavaScript object. Now, here is your typical JSON code. Sorry. Let's drive a new example of how to use JSON inside of a file. The first thing that you need to do is to create a file with the .json extension at the end of it. So that's .json at the end of your file, and that will create a JSON file. Inside of this JSON file, what you do is you take one of the types that we talked about and you put that inside of the file. So for example, you could put a string, you could put a number, a boolean, whatever type you want inside of a file that's valid JSON. But if all you have is a single string or a single number, it's really not very helpful or useful to have a whole file for the single input. So most of the time when you're working with JSON, you'll have either an array or an object as your top level of your file. And then inside of the array or object, you'll have other values. It may even have other objects, have other arrays, or even just individual values, such as strings or numbers inside of that. Let's go back. It may even have other objects, have other arrays, or even just individual values, such as strings or numbers inside of that. Let's take an example of a user object that we want, to put at the top level of our JSON file, which we're going to call user.json. To create an object, we need to use opening and closing curly braces. Then inside of that, we'll put all the key values pairs that make up our object. In every single one of these key values pairs, the key must be surrounded by double quotes, followed by a colon, and then the value for that key. If we have multiple key value pairs, we need commas separating every single one of our key value pairs, similarly to how we would create an array in a normal programming language. For example, if our user key has a name, we would surround the name key in double quotes, put a semicolon after it, and then we would put the value of our name inside of the double quotes as well. Because it's a string and it must be in double quotes. And then at the end of it, we'll put a comma because we have other key value pairs for our user. For example, if we wanted to use their age as another property, we'll put age in double quotes, followed by a semicolon, and then put that user's age. If we wanted to use a boolean, we use a comma. And then another property we would use is employed. As our key, put a colon, then we would put either true or false with no quotes around it to signify that this is a boolean and not a string. We would put true or false depending on if that user was employed or not, if that user is or was employed or not. We could then go down and use description in double quotes, semicolon, and then to create an array, we use opening and closing square brackets, and inside of the array, we put whatever type of value we want. In this case, we're just going to use strings for the different physical attributes. We'll put those strings inside of a double quotes, and we'll put commas between each one of them because we put commas between all the values in an array or writing out JSON. Next, we could have another property that will be an array of friends, but instead of putting strings inside of this array, we're going to put more user objects inside of that array. So we can put different user objects inside of that array, and now we have nesting of arrays with objects. That's how you really get into the power of JSON, where you can start to deeply nest different properties and really show a hierarchy of data as opposed to just a flat format of data like most data format files give you. For example, for this friends array, we could have a friends array, and it can have the same properties with name, age, and employed, and even friends inside of that, and you can start to get a very deeply nested array if you really want it. Then we just have to make sure that we don't put a comma on the very last property value key pair that we have. Close it with a curly brace, and that's our full JSON file created. Now that we understand what JSON is and the syntax involved with writing JSON, I'm going to jump into an example of me writing JSON file and then parsing that file in JavaScript. All right, you have to forgive me. I can't do the whole typing and talking at the same time because I will make a million mistakes and it will just be terrible. I tried doing it. I've seen the guys on YouTube do it. I've seen girls do it on YouTube, and I just can't do it. I can't even talk and chew gum at the same time, or walk, whatever. Anyways, let's get to it. All right. Here I have Visual Studio Code open, and I'm inside of a file called companies. Well, mine's not called companies.json. Mine is called index.html. And let's make sure that that's right. Do I have companies? Maybe I should start out with the JSON. Did anybody else notice that? All right, let's see. Let's start over again. JSON, do I need that? No, I don't need that. JSON. Too live. Okay. All right. Thank you for bearing with me. I really don't want to cut any of that out. I may just leave it in. Yes, I do video editing for fun. It's kind of creepy, like looking up at my screen. All right, anyways. Again, back to the script. I have Visual Studio Code open, and I'm inside of a file called companies.json. There it is. All right. Now, we are going to store an array of different companies, and each of these companies are going to have a name, number of employees, a CEO, and their rating out of 5. As you can see up here, we got the first one, big company, big corporation, employees 10,000, and Aaron is the CEO, and a rating 4.5. So let's get started. By using our syntax for creating an array, which is to use an opening and closing square bracket, and inside of this array, we're going to store different objects. So our first object is going to be our company, our first company, which, as we mentioned, has a name, and we're going to give that name, that company, a name of a big corporation. And then we put the comma at the end of the row. We want to give it a number of employees as well, and then this number of employees for this big corporation, we're going to say that they have 10,000 employees. Then we want to give them a CEO. And their CEO name is going to be Aaron, which is my wife. Then lastly, their rating out of 5 stars is going to be 4.5. Yes, all right. Pretend that I'm typing as I'm speaking. Now, we want to store a second company in this array. So we just put a comma at the end of our first company, right there. Open up a new object and then give it the same property. So basically, I just copy and paste this down here and then change all the information inside. We'll say the name, and we're just going to give this one the name of, I don't know, Gary's Startup. All right. And we're going to go down the line, and we got the number of employees. In this case, we're going to say that it's 5, since this is a small startup company. CEO is next, and this company does not have a CEO. Technically, I'm the CEO. But since it doesn't have a CEO, we're just going to put no, just so we can use no, nothing. I am nothing. I am null. I'm going to wear a sticker that says my name is null. We're just going to put rereading lines in my, I should just stick to the script. Stick to the script. We're just going to put a null here, which is okay to have different types inside of your JSON object because JSON doesn't care what types your different keys are. It just matters that you have keys and values. So we have null here. And lastly, we're going to give them a rating of 4.2. There we go. That is our entire company's JSON object. And as you can see, we have no errors because it's all pretty. Now let's look up the index.html file here. So we go up to here, click on that bad boy. Now, again, I've already completed this, but just bear with me, follow along. It just, you know, it starts out with a standard HTML simple page, and then you add your code. So here, we'll go back to the script. As an opening, so index.html file has an opening script tag that we can put some JavaScript in here to run on our page. So let's create a variable. We're just going to call it companies, and we're going to copy everything from this company's JSON because, as I mentioned, I actually called it business. Sorry, I changed the name. I mentioned at the beginning of the video that JSON, anything in JSON is valid JavaScript. So we can take the JSON directly. So let's go back to JSON. You basically just copy and paste. I know I missed that one. Copy that and just paste it right in here. And we'll get to the back tags here in a second. So yes, JSON, anything in JSON is valid JavaScript. So we can take JSON directly and just paste it into our company's variable. Then we go down here, we log the company's variable, and we check that out inside of our browser. So we check out our browser, and there we go. Big corporation, Gary Startup, and then got all the information. So it's working. Yay! We have CEO, name, number of employees, and ratings. All this information that we have in this file here that we copied over in the JavaScript file, and the same thing. Now, here we have our other company, but most of the time when you're dealing with JSON, you're going to get it back as a string and not as actual JavaScript object. So to emulate that, we're surround this in backticks. That's what these are right here. Just put little backticks. It is not the little comma. It's the one up by the little squiggly. I forget what the little squiggly is called. The tilde. So the tilde. Yeah. So we put that there, and that turns it, well, back to this. So that turns it back to an actual string. If you save that, you'll see that now our console just has a string instead of an actual object. We can't actually use this object inside of our JavaScript. In order to convert this JSON string into JavaScript, our JavaScript object, we need to use what's called Json Dot Parse, which is right here. We pass it in a string. It'll take the string and convert it into a JavaScript object. Now, as you can see in here, we have our object, our JavaScript object that we create from the string here, using Json Dot Parse to get a JSON object right here. We can use this inside of JavaScript. For example, if we wanted, we could get the first company inside of the array, and we could get their name. It prints out the first company's name. The second company's name prints it out, and so on. You can do anything that you could do with a normal JavaScript object to this newly parsed JSON object that we created with Json Dot Parse. Parse. I hope this video was useful for you. As you can see, the actual format for JSON is straightforward. You just have to mostly remember to use double quotes around all of your different keys, because in JavaScript, you don't need double quotes, but in JSON you do. So that's the only difference between JavaScript and JSON. Other than that, it's very straightforward. It's easy to read, which is great because just looking at this, you can tell what it is it's representing, and you can tell what the different keys and values mean, and it's extremely lightweight. So when you send it across the internet through different APIs, it'll take up a very little amount of space, which means it'll quickly send back and forth, which gives your user a great experience. Thank you guys very much for watching. All right, now before I go, we're gonna do a little bonus here. So I did all this. Now there's another way you can do it, and you can get this from the W3S School of Internet Things. Anyways, as you can see, these are very similar, but the array is gone. Okay, so it's been replaced by this section here. And you can get the template from this, like I said, from the W3 School website. And it's all you have to do is put in, do a search, and you can do XML Http Request. And that's what this does. And what it does is it searches your JSON and it goes through all the different lines of code that you put in it. And what it does, we're gonna go over here, switch to it. It makes it live. Now, okay, so in order to do live, if you want it to be live, you have to download an extension. And what I have is Live Server by Ritwick Day. This may be old news. This may be something that Sister Campbell has already gone over, or maybe somebody else has posted in the forum. But awesome, because you can do it live. So there's there's Big Corporation and Gary's Startup. It's live. Let's see. Do we want to do? Let's just do something simple so you can see that it's live. We're gonna change the color from my favorite color, orange to pink, and boom. Then you got Control Save. It's probably gonna make me a liar now. It's making me a liar. Okay. So there was a glitch. I had to disconnect and then reconnect. So let's try it again. So let's go back into app.css. Let's pick out pink. Let's do green. Wait, I like another green. Where's that other one at? Green, yellow. So let's go into the green, yellow. Control save. Boom. There it is. It's live. All right. So yeah, and what it does is instead of it looking at your file that's in folder, it actually sends it to this website, and there it goes as an IP address. So that's how it works. If you guys are more interested in this, I will definitely be throwing up some videos or some links to videos on the next time that I'm on our forum. All right, peace out.